So I hope everyone had a good break, that you could really got up, take something to drink, maybe look outside of the window if you have a nice sunny day, as we do have in Brussels. I see the numbers were changing during the day, so we nearly reached at 1,000 people. Now we're at 840. So I hope that some people maybe reconnect for the final two presentations and the closing remarks. We have now presentation of Solon and Björn, and I would like to see if the colleagues can show the faces. I see Solon. So please, you can start.
Thank you. So my name is Solon and with colleague Björn Zapfel, we will present to you about the key performance indicators, another topic which deserves quite a bit of effort from the projects, but for good reasons that I hope to present to you, and also with a lot of support from our side that I hope you will also see. So next slide, please. So you may ask, why do we need to deal with key performance indicators? Why do we need to report as projects? It's because basically, well, to the bottom side, you asked for it, because it's been asked by the member states, by the parliament, to actually have the Commission reporting on several indicators that are mentioned within the regulation of the LIFE program inside Annex 2. So bottom line is, you're the ones asking for it, and hence we have built this in order to get the results and explain to the people what actually you have achieved as LIFE projects. Next slide, please. So how do we actually do it? What we do is we gather information from the projects, we aggregate it, and then based on the aggregation, we can report at program level what the LIFE program has achieved. So what we're looking from the projects is their inputs on where their impact is going to be, what was the initial situation, what's the end impact at the end of the project, and what the situation will be 3-5 years after. We take that information through the KPI database, our tool which standardizes how everybody reports on key performance indicators. And we aggregate to find the LIFE impact, including what has been achieved, how much has been achieved, and where has been achieved through the so-called context. Now, it's important to note that your project may have a lot of indicators, but not all of them may fit in the KPI database. The KPI database is meant simply to gather information about the indicators that we in the LIFE program need to report upon towards the parliament, but also towards policymakers. So if the things like that you may feel you need to gather indicators for, but they're not present in the LIFE KPI database, then you should report upon them, but not through the KPI database, but through your own tools, your own reports, okay? I will give some examples of that later on. Next slide, please. So specifically for LIFE 21 projects onwards, those who may have experience from the past with LIFE key performance indicators, you may remember that in the previous multi-annual work programs, the applicants had to submit an Excel file. They had to then manually transfer the data to our KPI database, the KPI web tool that we use in LIFE to gather the data of the projects. And this is no longer the case. So for LIFE 21 to 27, applicants had to fill in an online form, the so-called Part C of e-grants. And this data that have been inserted in there will now be automatically transferred to the KPI web tool. There might be some exceptions of certain indicators. For example, if you reported on other project-specific KPIs, those cannot be transferred. But most of the data, about 90% or more, should have been transferred to the KPI web tool automatically. So you no longer have to deal with Excel files. So today's session will be about the KPI web tool, the KPI database that we use to gather your data. Okay, what you will see there when you start reporting. Next slide, please. The live KPI database, first of all, which projects will need to report in the KPI database? That's the SAPs, so ENV, Environment Gov, Nature Governance, Climate Governance. In the future, you're not here yet are the strategic projects like the SIP and the SNAPs, but also the CET projects and BEST. Not reporting in the KPI database are the operating grants like NGOs, the technical assistance, and the preparatory projects. Next slide, please. So the projects that are reporting should have inside the grant agreement in the deliverables, a KPI deliverable for reporting in the KPI database within the first 9 months, and another deliverable for the final report stage at minimum. Okay, but they're not there, then something must have happened during the gap stage of the project. So there should be 2 deliverables that you need to deliver on the KPIs within your list of deliverables. How do you deliver it? Well, projects should access the KPI database, report your impacts, and then they should submit their KPIs for verification via the KPI database, via the web tool, and then extract, and you will see that the KPI database enables that, extract the information into an Excel and submit it as your deliverable. That's all basically you have to do on a very high level. Next slide, please. So there will be different types of KPIs for the CT and for the ENV, NAT, Klima, those who may know, let's say, the traditional life. So we will split the presentation from now on in 2 parts. Section A will be for the environment, nature, climate, and the strategic ones. And section B will be for the CET, and Björn will present at the end of the whole presentation slides specifically for the energy transition program. Next slide, please. So let's concentrate now on the ENV, NAT, and Klima projects. So as I said before, data transferred from e-grants Part C to the KPI database. This includes all the context that you have selected. So the country and Natura 2000. Also, any of the 20 e-grants Part C KPIs that you have completed with full set of values. This excludes, unfortunately, the species KPIs and all the so-called other project-specific KPIs that don't fit anywhere. The data that has been transferred includes the descriptors that you selected, the values, the units, and the comments entered. Next slide, please. So what you need to do in raw terms is now you should, if you don't have experience in the KPI database, go and look at the 5 KPI training modules, and I include the link here. Access the KPI database through the link that you also see here, and you will receive the slides, so you will be able to have these links immediately available. If there's any issues with your access, then please use the Live IT Help Desk web form through the link here to report it, and they will support you in gaining access. And then once you have access to the database, provide new KPIs or update your impacts inside the live KPI database by checking or updating whatever data was transferred from Part C. As I said, the context, descriptors, values, units, comments, or enter new KPI data. For example, any of those other specific project KPIs that you had inserted in Part C, have a look. What is the best correspondence within the KPI database? If you find something corresponding, then you can enter it. If there is nothing there, then I'm afraid you will not be able to transfer those other specific project KPIs. Check also the data validity. We have now tools, including the standardization, if you like, or how big the values you're reporting are, that will help you to check whether the data you're reporting is okay, because there might be errors in the way or the amounts that you're reporting, and you will be warned about them. If everything is okay, you finish, then you submit your data, you extract them, and you provide them as a deliverable in an Excel, as I mentioned in the previous slide. Next one, please. So the first thing that you will have to deal with is the context. Context in the KPI database should clarify the location of your different impacts. In eGrants, in the part C, when you did your application, you could enter a country and a Natura 2000 site where impacts would take place. However, you could not separate the impacts per place. All impacts were registered in all countries or Natura 2000 sites that you had selected. But this may not be accurate because some impacts may only take place in some places, not in all the places that you selected. In the KPI database, you will be able to see the selected elements that you will have transferred from the part C of eGrants. You will see them there, again, as a single context, as you also had in eGrants, but then you will be able to break it down if you wish. So if you need to separate things to explain what is happening where, in the KPI database, you will be able to do it by creating more context and clarifying the location of the impacts. Next slide, please. So as an example for the context, assume that in part C, a project said we will have France and Germany as a context. So we will have impact in these two countries. And the impact, one of the impacts reported was employment. We will create 5 new full-time equivalents. Now, it doesn't say much, and the member states are asking, well, how much is the impact in my country and how much is the impact in another country? So what we need to know is obviously how much is in France and how much is in Germany. So in the KPI database, the part C data transferred will result to a single specific context with France and Germany together, and a KPI entry in jobs created, again, of 5, but then you will need to break it down to say how much in France, how much in Germany. Next slide, please. The way it's done is that you basically, in the KPI database, will need to create 2 separate contexts, one just for France and one just for Germany. And you will see also from the training modules that the system allows you to do this. And then having 2 separate contexts allows you to provide values for the jobs. Let's say in France, it was 3, and in Germany, it was 2. So you will have to modify the transfer data, change the context, for example, instead of France plus Germany to just France, change the value from 5 to 3, just for France, and then create a second KPI indicator for the jobs for Germany and enter 2 for Germany. That way you clarify the impact for France and the impact for Germany. Now, there might be cases where the project has too many contexts. You're reporting on 100 Natura 2000 sites, or you're having impacts in many different places. In that case, to simplify, try to merge them, because we don't want you to spend all your time trying to report on the impacts. We want to have as accurate data as possible, but we do understand that it might be too time consuming. In that case, speak with your monitor, speak with the project advisor, and try to reach an agreement on how to simplify things. Now, I repeat again something that I said earlier on. Please watch the KPI context training module on the live website in the reporting section on how to create or modify the context. This will provide you nice information on how this is done. Next, please. Okay. In this table here, what you see is a table which indicates how the different values, how the KPIs in eGrants have been transferred to the KPI database. So we moved out of context and now we go to the actual values If you remember in eGrants, you had a little menu where you could select indicators and then you had to report values within them. Well, these are the indicators that were in that menu. And here in this table, you see that they've been transferred into the KPI database and under certain indicators in the KPI database. And for each indicator, I indicate here in this table on the third column what the project needs to do to improve them. Also, to give you an understanding of the effort, I have made some sort of indication of the additional effort needed in order to improve or sort out the entries inside the KPI database. So, for example, what you need to be checked or what needs to be improved or being added. So you don't have to look at the whole of this, but you will see that some indicators require very low effort because basically the data is already there. You don't have to do much. But in other cases, you will need a bit of more effort and maybe data in order to complete the indicators as they are in the KPI database, okay? Just bear in mind that, as I said before, the remaining Part C KPIs like close to market, other specific KPIs, etc., those you have not been transferred, and those you need to see how, if there are relevant indicators within the KPI database, you may be able to transfer them yourselves to somewhere else. Next slide, please. I'll give you some examples now, okay, of these indicators. So, for example, if we look at soil, what you had was basically you had to select a descriptor. Let's say it was desertification. That has been transferred. You see on the right how it looks now in the KPI database. Desertification, you should find it there. There were values for the start and beyond, 1098. The 1098, you should also find it in the KPI database as well. Your comments should also be in the comments. So the project, the only thing that we'll need to do for this particular KPI, if they reported in soil, is to check that everything has been transferred correctly and then provide any optional flags they consider relevant. So for example, what are the functions, the soil functions that are related to the threats addressed. Next example, another one of very low effort, thank you, is on the jobs created. Again, you will find all your data transferred from eGrants, but what you will need to do, if possible, and it's advisable that you do so, but if nothing fits, is to look at the optional flags section where you can actually provide additional further information. For example, what's the age of the people you're hiring? What's the gender, their education, specificities about them, etc., etc. Okay, so again, a very easy, low effort KPI. If nothing needs to be changed, if the context is the same and is a single, you don't have to split it up. It's ready to go. Just press on save and it's done. Next one, please. One that requires a higher level of effort, for example, is the air. You may remember that in eGrants, you had to report a number of people that benefited from the air quality improvement or the air emissions reductions. That information has been transferred to the KPI that we have in the KPI database called 1.6, which is about humans impacted. So please check that everything has been transferred correctly. You might be asked also to clarify the type of people. Is it the residents? Is it the employees? Is it visitors in a Natura 2000 site? Who are they that have been impacted? So there might be additional information that you need to enter. But in addition to this, and that's why it's a bit higher effort, you need to tell us in a different KPI, you should also go to section 6 and report on the actual air emissions improvements or the reduction of air pollutants, or the reduction of exceedances of pollution that are taking place. You will see that it will be available in section 6. So apart from just people, you need to actually tell us what actually has been achieved in terms of improving the actual situation for the environment. So demonstrate the reduction in pollution and the pressure on the air. Next slide, please. Another one that will require some additional data, for example, is the greenhouse gases, where you had in eGrants only one line to declare, which was how much was the amount of greenhouse gas emissions at the beginning. What was at the end will be beyond. That line has been transferred, as you will see, but there's an additional line that is being asked, which is basically, well, how did you achieve these reductions? And it's up to you to define the outcome. For example, it might be that you're reducing CO2 emissions per product that you're producing or per service that you're giving. So that is now an additional line that you will need to provide. But in theory, most of you, if you have done your calculations and provided the total CO2 emissions, most of you know against what this reduction has taken place. So it shouldn't be so difficult to make. Next one, please. A more difficult one, a high effort one is, for example, water. There, the line again has been transferred from eGrants to the KPI database. So the data that you were asked was, what is the amount of savings? So you were asked, how much water are you spending at the beginning? How much are you spending at the end? What will be the spending 3 years, 5 years later? So we can actually see the reduction. But now what we want, what we're asking more in the KPI database is an understanding of how that was achieved. So we want to know in the previous lines, a breakdown of the top line. So how much of that saving was it due to reuse? How much was it due to loss, for example, leakages that were stopped? Or how much was it prevented through reduction of demand or other means? You will see that these lines where we're asking additional information have a -1 inside, because that means, because the system will not allow negative values, you will need to change the -1 into another value. And if you don't have an impact, you just change everything to 0 and you press on save. So here is basically a clarification of the amounts that you declared in eGrants. And next one. I think the most high effort is on the species, unfortunately, where in eGrants, the only thing that you were asked to declare was the number of species. So if you had bears and only, then you had to just declare bears. So the number was 011 basically, and that's it. You will see in the KPI database, of course, we ask for more information. So the number of species comes because you have to tell us which are the species, the whole list to select from. And then you have to give us information on the range area of the species, the count of the species within the context, but also the count of the species within the member state where the project is taking place. So there's a lot more additional information that you have to enter for this specific indicator, which I personally think is the highest effort in comparison to what's in eGrants. But through all these examples that I'm showing here, you will be able to come back to these slides, hopefully, and to see how things have been transferred and what you need to do when you get inside the KPI database. So you have, through this and the various training modules, more support. Next slide, please. So in total, the KPI database contains about 45 impact indicators that are relevant for the Annex 2 that the LIFE program needs to report upon, but also have policy interests. So projects should examine if any of the eGrants Part C KPIs that were in the other project-specific KPIs can be transferred to these 45 KPIs. And I give you some examples. Actual noise reductions in dB then can be entered in the 5.2b indicator in the KPI database, which is about noise reduction terrestrial. Air emissions or exceedances reductions can go in section 6 of the KPI database. Climate adaptation, for example, the area or infrastructures adapted can be entered in section 9. Governance, like stakeholders, achievements, including, for example, legal cases that you may have done, specifically important for governance projects, or policy feedback that you may have given can't be entered in section 10. Website information, tools, surveys that you did can't be entered in the information and awareness section 11. Networking with other projects can be entered in the networking synergies section 12, but also financial aspects or elements linked to replication or transfer or continuation can go into section 14. And a lot of you didn't have where to put it. We saw a lot of you tried to put this information in the other project specific KPIs, but for the e-grants, we try to keep it very simple. So as very, very simple indicators, because proposals are not even funded. So we didn't want you at proposal stage to spend so much time on it. But now that you have the funding, now you can spend a bit more time to see if those other project specific KPIs fit within the KPI database itself. Next slide, please. But as I mentioned previously, not all your project KPIs may fit the live KPI database. So don't try to transfer things if they don't fit, because they don't have relevance for the Annex 2 of the live regulation or the policymakers. And I give you an example that I've seen. There was a project which will create a monitoring system for monitoring the release of dangerous chemicals. The project reported in e-grants Part C and other project-specific KPI that it will measure amount of data per day sent by the monitoring system. There is no such KPI in the live KPI database, no link to Annex 2 or policy needs. So this amount of data per day can be reported either in your own project tools or in your project reports, but not in the live KPI database. However, if due to the monitoring, the project also manages to reduce the release of the chemicals, so we have an actual reduction in chemicals, that could be actually reported in the live KPI database under the chemicals section. So if it doesn't fit in the KPI database, don't force it inside, okay? Just, it's not there due to no relevance to the Annex 2 or to the policy needs. Next slide, please. In addition, please bear in mind that you must report on the following mandatory KPIs. So 1.5 on the project work area, on humans impacted, at least one environmental or climate indicator in your sector. So if you are a water project, you need to report in water. If you are a CCA, you need to report on climate adaptation, CCM on climate mitigation, etc. Also the website hits, the networking and synergies with projects or initiatives, the new jobs created, the revenue during or after the project then due to project outcomes, and also the catalytic effect, so financial cumulative investments triggered of finance access, and also one on the sustainability of the project, on the continuation of the project to know if you will continue or not. Next slide, please. The final thing that you will see is that, as I mentioned it before, the KPI database has a number of automated check buttons. Please have a look also on the video modules, as I said, on the live website, where you get some information on that. But if you click on these 4 buttons, please correct the errors that you will see, because in some cases you might be blocked, or you will be sent the information back for revision by the monitor or the project advisor or by myself. On the other hand, if you see the trends and ranges warnings showing up, just double check your figures, explain well in the comments how you calculated them, and if everything is okay, then no worries about those. Next slide, please. So the next steps for you. What I suggest here is a timetable that I suggest. Projects should visit the live website, watch the first video module on how to access if you've never accessed before. And I propose that you do that by mid-October. Then at that point, we will also open up the data inside the KPI database for your projects. So by end of October, please go to the KPI database, try to access and have a look at your project data, okay? Then go back, visit the live website again, watch the remaining video modules on how to make the context, how to navigate, how to enter your values. And I propose you do that by the mid of November. And then go back to the KPI database once you feel happy with the training and the modules, have a look at also this slides again and start checking, improving the project data transferred from eGrants, and try to enter new KPIs if you wish, and resolve any errors and any warnings. For any IT issues, for example, for access, I haven't been able to access, please use our IT web form. And if the projects have any issues, concerns, or questions, there will be a session on KPIs on the 6th of December. We will send you some links and the exact timing soon, but it will be just questions and answers. So if you have issues on how to fill in the KPIs or even access, then you come to us, you ask your questions. There will be no more presentations. It will be you doing the talking more than me doing the talking, and I'll try with my colleagues to give you solutions. The next thing then, you have to submit the first snapshot data 9 months after the project end, and your final snapshot at the final report stage. Next slide, please. So one final thing to say, you are not alone. You have now new training videos that have been prepared. I give again the link, I mentioned it earlier before. Each KPI includes an updated guide. We worked extensively during the summer to give you as much help as possible to explain what you have to select, what you have to input where. So there's sometimes a lot of examples within the guide, so please use them. Also, we aim to facilitate you further by putting these guides of all the KPIs in one single place on the live website, something to be done for the near future, and also provide you information about what are the different lists that we have in the KPI database to facilitate your search, for example, in the Natura 2000 sites, or you're looking for a specific chemical that you want to report upon. Also, your monitors are there to help you. And if you have issues that you cannot resolve, apart from the session on the 6th of December, you may also contact CINEA for IT issues through the web form. But also, if there are issues with content that the monitor cannot resolve or the project advisor cannot resolve, then you can contact CINEA monitoring. For example, if you know that something is missing from the database, like, for example, a chemical should be there, but it's not, Natura 2000 site should be there, but it's not, then contact the live monitoring and it will come the problem to me and I'll try to resolve it. Next slide, please. And with this, I hand over to Björn for the energy transition projects. Björn, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Solon. As Solon has already said, I would now like to very briefly really continue to put a spot on the live clean energy transition, or in short, the SET sub-program and its specific approach to impact monitoring. When it comes to live, the SET program is something like the new kid on the block, as you will know. And in this context, in this sense, it is the key program for the clean energy policy implementation of the European Union, and it fills the gaps between energy efficiency and renewable energy policy development on the one hand and implementation on the other hand. In this context, just to give you an idea, now the first batch of around 70 live energy projects are being contracted in this context. So it's quite new, a new part of the whole live universe and the live family. SET, even though it's a new member of the live family, does not start, of course, in a complete vacuum, not at all, but it builds on the preceding funding programs, like, for instance, the Intelligent Energy Europe program, and in particular also the Horizon 2020 program, and their specific impacts, which, and I think that's important to emphasize and to note, focus strongly on market uptake and are therefore mainly rather indirect impacts. And this is also a bit reflected on how the monitoring approach is structured. This means on this basis, the SET approach to impact monitoring is specific. In certain respects, it differentiates a little bit from what Solon has described so far, even though it follows the principal directions, of course. In this sense, it is tailored and adapted to the particular objectives of the SET program, and generally, of course, also aligned with the impacts achieved under the preceding programs that I've just mentioned before. It focuses on a rather limited number of key performance indicators and also related descriptors. I will get back to that in a second. And it does not, and this is one of the main operational, I would say, differences, it does not involve monitors for validation, at least for the time being. Next slide, please. Overall, as I've just mentioned before, LifeSet has a limited number of 11 key performance indicators, which are defined, you know that, in the proposal documents, because all of you have submitted proposals under the SET program. And then they are included as part C of Annex 1 of the grant agreement in the process of contract preparation. Solon has already described that for the other parts of life. These include in particular, for instance, primary and final energy savings triggered by the project in question, but also related renewable energy generation and greenhouse gas emissions. And what is very important for our program as well, investments in sustainable energy triggered by the project in question. But they also include further, partly I would say, more qualitative impacts, like, just to give you an idea, for instance, the legislation and the policy affected by the project, market introduction of new products, new processes, new methods on the market, new or the number of real-life implementation sites achieved during the project duration, enhanced skills and competencies play an important role, or also information dissemination and awareness raising in this context, as well as last but not least, job creation. Quantitative estimations are required for, or in the context of the SET program, for a twofold planning horizon, namely the envisaged value at the project end. And the second value important to specify is the value for the period 5 years beyond the project end. Next slide, please. These key performance indicators are, and that's very similar to what, or exactly the same as Solon has described before, are imported in the KPI database during contract preparation, where they are, let's say, enriched afterwards by 3 different aspects, namely, and also here that's very similar to other parts of life, by the definition of the geographic context in which the impact shall and will be achieved. Then also by indicator descriptors, but a quite limited number. In particular, there will be most probably only, or there will be only one specifying the extent to which the main economic sectors are affected by the single key performance indicators. So whether it's in the building sector, whether it's in the industry sector, etc. And last but not least, so-called flags, which are clarifying specific project characteristics and features, and in this sense would be able to play a role as a kind of tags to be used for further specific strategic analysis. The key performance indicators and these additional attached specifications, which I have just mentioned, would need to be updated, also very similarly like Solon has described for other parts of life, by the project coordinator at 2 points in time, namely again 9 months after the project start and once again at the project end. But these updates are done in discussion and validated by the responsible project advisors without an additional validation step of monitors. More detailed information in this context we will provide to the newly contracted projects in due time, and specifically also, for instance, by project advisors during the kickoff meetings, etc. And I think this was just a very brief limelight on how SET will approach the KPI database and the impact indicators. I think I will stop here also to enable enough time for questions. And with that, I would like to thank you for your attention so far. And yeah, would like to open also the floor for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. I guess the Slido will be up very soon with the questions, or maybe still people are typing the questions.
I think I can take some of this straight ahead. So do you already have a date to reserve for the December session? 6th of December right now, we aim for a morning session, but 6th of December is set for the time being. How regularly do I need to report KPIs? Okay, in the database, if you're a SAP or a CT project, you only need to report twice, 9 months after the project starts and at final report. If you are a strategic project, but you're not here, but you might be launching a strategic project in the future, then you will have an interim. Now, if it's not just for the KPI database, then in your reports, you might report more regularly about your own KPIs. That is your own business. But for the KPI database, if you're a SAP or CET, you only need to report twice, okay? Other financial penalties for not reaching KPIs reported. Directly, no. So if you haven't reached, if I see inside the KPI database that the expected KPIs have not been reached in terms of how much CO2 you're supposed to save or how much waste you were supposed to save, there's no direct financial penalty for it. However, I have to say that when we detect that, it usually has to do because something failed within the project. And because something failed within the project, they haven't been able to reach the KPIs. And that failure may be linked to some financial consequences, but they're not directly linked to the KPIs. They have to do with how the project executed their grant agreement or other issues. But directly, the KPIs are not linked with financial penalty. So how will fill in the KPIs? The coordinator of the project, all project partners, beneficiaries. Right now, we have given access to the contact point of the project that was also in e-grants, but more people may wish to gain access and enter data for specific indicators. However, we propose that the whole thing is centralized and that only 1 or 2 people do this work, because otherwise it will become a bit difficult for you also to manage the situation and also to manage who will actually submit finally the data. So we propose that 1 or 2 people work on this and not all the partners, but it's up to you how you wish to do this. More people can gain access if needed. Next one, my experience is that humans impacted in the project is very difficult to calculate. How should I think? Indeed, is a very good point. It's very difficult, and depending on the type of project you have, it might be a different way. So for example, if you're a governance information project and you're raising awareness and you want to measure about how many people you've raised awareness for, well, in some cases, you look at the single visits on the website. In other cases, you might say, I worked in this area, and I will do a survey out of 1,000 people in the area. I check that 2% have been impacted, so I can make an extrapolation for the whole area of that 2%, and that's a valid value. In other cases, you might be an actual project reducing air emissions, for example, in a city, or noise within a certain area of a city. And you know that within that certain area that you impacted, X amount of people are living, you make an estimation that this amount of people hence are the ones that have been impacted by the air or the noise reduction. But when you have this, it's very difficult. You cannot go door to door. So as long as you have your approach, you explain in the comments, then it's fine. Just find something which is logical, justifiable, and provable, and you will be okay. Explain in your comments.
So,
yep.
I saw 3 questions about the December session, so maybe we should group them. First, the question is that it is a public holiday in Spain, so whether the 6th of December is set in stone. Second, whether the session will be recorded and whether it's for all the projects, so including the set projects. So I don't know if you want to start replying, or Björn.
Well, I can say that the date is fixed, and also it will be recorded. I will ask our colleagues of NEMO to record the session for those who are not able to attend, but also if people want to send questions in advance, we can do it and make the responses at the session so that they're available then to watch in a recorded fashion afterwards. And Björn, for the CET?
Well, CET will not be directly included in the session on the 6th of December. So we are planning a specific approach also to provide specific information on CET projects, and we will communicate that to the contracted projects quite soon.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Agnieszka. Another one, is it possible to add indicators a posteriori between 9 months and end of the project? The answer is yes for the normal life. I think also Björn for CT is the same.
Yes, it's the same, exactly the same.
Then where can I get help with reporting on, it disappeared. How can I get help with reporting on KPIs? So you will find on the live website, on the reporting section, and also you will see the links in this presentation that I just gave you when you get the slides, that there are training modules on how to use the KPI database, how to calculate your values even. There's another old training session that you can watch. But as I mentioned also, each KPI, once you go inside, and each section has its own guide, so you can actually click on open the guide and read through and understand how you actually can report. But also the monitors are there to help you. They have a lot of experience with KPIs from the past multi-annual work program, so they should be able to support you too.
Maybe.
Yep.
So maybe we take a question on the set, because I see there's one, and maybe colleagues can, if there's another one dedicated, and Björn can take both of them at the same time.
So for set KPIs, many factors are out of control. Are there grant penalties for not reaching the targets? Well, in principle, you have to say that not all the set KPIs are mandatory for all of the projects. So in the call topics, you have a number of expected impacts already defined that you include depending on the project objectives, etc., in your proposal. And this is also part of the evaluation of the proposal. Therefore, you also indicate that you are able to control these key performance indicators to a certain extent during the project duration, which then also means that you will report on them. Yeah, so we have included them in accordance with the call topic into your proposal and report and update them later on. In this case, whether there are penalties for not reaching the targets, I think I can echo mostly what Solon has said. In principle, these are targets that you want to reach. These are mainly numbers, but there is, of course, reasons behind. And therefore, I think it's very important then also you're not only reporting in a report on the key performance indicators, but you also explain in the reports what were the problems, what was achieved. If it is after 9 months, which kinds of contingency measures you would set in place to reach them, etc., etc. So this is a bit of behind it, that you look on, what is intended to be achieved and why was it achieved. And then at the end, there is no direct cost penalty, but there is, of course, an assessment also together with the project advisors during the project duration and the monitoring period if there are problems occurring.
Thank you, Björn. So we go back to the general question on KPI, Solon.
Yeah,
want to take the
how
first
to report KPIs 5 years after the project? Well, okay, the simple answer is that you will see that there is a box as you had in eGrants where you can report the situation 5 years after. Now, how do you calculate that? It's an estimation. So you have to see what your plan is in terms of replications, sustainability of your project, and make some estimations of what you think the situation will be 5 years after the project. You cannot be 100% accurate on this. Is it possible to fill in the KPIs before the start date of the project? Yes, you can start filling in as quickly as possible. The moment you sort out your access, you can start doing it. If our project concerns multiple areas, is it necessary to break down the total KPI into individually measured values? I would say for the first snapshot, the 9 months, if it's too complex, you can keep it simple and maybe in one specific context, but definitely for the final report, you should break it down. In fact, you should break it down from the first snapshot if possible, but as I said, if it's too complex, let's say you have 100 Natura 2000 sites and you just don't have time, then okay, you can leave it in a merged situation. But if it's just 2 countries, I suggest you start doing it from the first snapshot. If you have technical issues, you can wait until the final snapshot 3-4 years from now, basically, to do the breakdown. It might also be that you don't know your values per country or per location, so you cannot do the split. So again, that would be a good reason to leave it for the end of the project. How does CINEA monitor the impacts 5 years after the projects? We have ex post checks. We have done it, for example, for the energy, where we went to a few projects that were finished a few years ago, and we asked, okay, what's the situation? And we entered that data within the KPI database and make a comparison. Is the external monitor prepared to help with the KPIs, or you? The external monitors for the SAPs, for the ENV, Klima, Nature are there to help you. They're there to help you on the KPIs. And of course, if that fails, also us. For the CT, Björn, I think it's primarily the project advisors, I would guess, right?
Well, exactly. We don't have monitors foreseen, at least for the time being. So in principle, as we did also in the past, when monitoring impacts, if there are issues, that's part of the discussion also of the project progress. So therefore, PAs in principle would be the first contact in this context, specifically also to discuss, what would that mean for any deviations for the future project duration.
Then the next one, our NGO need to do KPIs? No. Not anymore. The NGOs are not, they do not need to report within the KPI database.
Thank you. Okay. So, I think we use all the list of all the questions. I know that the next speaker is connected, so I hope she's there. Yes, I see a little signal that she's there. So I would like to thank two colleagues for the presentation, and we are a little bit ahead of time. We will start with the next presenter, which is Agata Kotkowska, the Deputy Head of Unit in the Budget Unit and Finance Unit in DG Environment. So please, the floor is yours.